Sveiki dar kartą.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is National Human Rights Forum, and a topic that is rarely discussed and rarely encountered. We're going to talk about juvenile offenders. Are they monsters, and what does this label hide? Let me hide criminologist Gintautas Sakalauskas, Deputy Speaker of the Seimas Orinta Lieputė, Vice Mayor of Vilnius Municipality Simona Bieliūnė, and Ombudsperson for Children's Rights Edita Žiobienė. Ms. Žiobienė, who is to blame when a child steals a bag of chips from the supermarket? There are many things in that child's life, and what are the reasons of such behavior, and what can be done at that time and after that. And it's not about that bag of chips, actually. But there are children who constantly commit crimes, and their teachers come and ask, we don't know what to do, and their parents tell that they don't know what to do, and maybe the child has to assume responsibility, or is it our fault when children keep stealing from shops? Yes, one part of that is the nurturing of the child, but the child himself or herself is also responsible for the behavior and its reasons and the consequences of that behavior. So in this case, we have to think about that responsibility. Mr. Sakalauskas, who's to blame when a child commits a crime? If we talk about shoplifting, in the second grade, once I stole a chocolate bar from a store, and the sales assistant saw that, and it was in 1981, and the director of the store came and went to my parents, and it really worked. After that, I never stole anything again. And I grew up in a good family. So it was the only time you stole the chocolate bar. Yes. I wasn't punished. I wasn't condemned for that. But there was still a reaction. And talking about studies, there are many people who could be punished. 10 to 15 percent of minors steal something before their 18th birthday. So there are many reasons. There are many children who shoplift because they're curious. They are testing boundaries. Some of them actually cannot afford to buy a chocolate bar, and we have to react adequately without dramatizations, without threatening, but trying to educate people. But you understand, if a child steals something, parents yell at him or her, and they are not interested in the reasons. There are different kinds of parents. There are parents who beat their children. There are people who yell at their children. There are parents who are not interested in their child and his or her behavior. So the stance of parents might be very different. Ms. Žiobienė, what do you think should be the reaction, and who should react if a child commits a crime? If we were perfectly reasonable and emotionless, the situations are very different. But first of all, we would have to find out the reasons of certain behaviors and how to react to that behavior. As in Gintautas' story, it was just an accident, but there are certain cases in which crimes are systematic and then the consequences are serious. And there are different kinds of crimes committed by minors. There is shoplifting, but there are crimes that are terrible and that shock the society. And before moving forward, let's overview the situation. In 2012, I was writing a thesis on socialization centers. At that time, there were 200 of them, and those are the centers where the state detains children, and in those centers, nothing is controlled. Those children are isolated in those centers. The situation is different round, isn't it? I would be very careful. Yes, those we have 3 centers in Lithuania, 2 for girls and 1 for boys, and those centers are very small, and there are approximately 20 children in those centers, and the buildings are beautiful and new. And I was against those centers in the regions of Lithuania. They are in the middle of nowhere, basically. There's a lack of professionals because those children need psychological help. And that's the reason why they're there. Another thing we're fighting for, there are many foster children in those centers. And they used to keep children in those centers for 3 years. And our society tends to isolate people, and they hope that these children will improve their behavior in those centers. And as a society, we have to understand that those children are part of our society. They're our children. And if they end up in those centers, they should spend only some time to receive certain services and come back to the society. And currently, those children can spend there up to 1 year, but those periods can be extended. And those centers often face a variety of problems with those periods of time. And children very often are not even given the opportunity to improve their behavior and come back into the society. There are fewer children in those centers than 10 years ago. Yes, fewer children, but it doesn't mean that children suddenly got better. It means that those children in need receive the necessary services in municipalities. And we see terrible headlines about juvenile delinquency, but the data shows that the crime rates are decreasing. Well, if we look at registered numbers, there's a
a great decrease here. But if we speak about socialization centers, we isolate children in there, and we call this institution socialization center, though there is no socialization there. This is a boarding school. We had 6 of them 10 years ago, and now we have 3, according to the Soviet educator Makarenko, and according to his um, pedagogical views that the state has to take care of education of children if parents are unable to do that. Very often we see that children cannot study in schools because they have no proper circumstances or conditions for that. But we tend to have those socialization centers, but we have some positive examples, not of a boarding school, but a farm that has been established in one of the regions and awarded by the president. In more general terms, we need such institutions where would house children for education and socialization, but we have to understand that a large part of delinquency in the childhood age tends to be corrected. It and this does not mean that we need some educational measures for that. Orientally, do you think that no socialization centers will be left in few years' time? You have the right to initiate draft laws on that. I think that I cannot say that we don't need such institutions because as long as we don't have all the available services, needed services for children with behavioral problems and delinquent children, or are addicted to drugs and other things, and they don't have services available, we will be working with the repercussions. I have seen an institution that has been a socialization center. It has changed a lot. Can you explain the difference? These were large institutions in the past where children were partly detained. And today we have institutions with small numbers of children willing to provide all the help and services for them. Certainly, this is working with the consequences. Well, it is difficult for me to say what will happen in 4 years' time. Ms. Biliunina, what is happening in Vilnius? Do we see a problem here? Or does your municipality have a vision how to help delinquent children? Your questions are very provocative today. While I had the opportunity to coordinate socialization centers, I want to reiterate that a child is a product of social environment, and a lot is determined by the family, by the school and environment the child is brought up. And it is important for his or her formation, and we have to change from the system of boarding school Soviet type, which is full of prison culture, and the transition to the situation we are now is hardly believable. And I think it is maybe too rapid. Have we changed the attitude towards children? Yes, we have children who violate the norms. Some of them are challenging the boundaries. Others want to adapt to their peers, or others have other unmet expectations. And sometimes such delinquent behavior, self-harm or other negative behaviors reflect the needs in child that are not satisfied. Our municipality is the largest. We have 1/4 of all the children, and 5 children go to socialization center each year. And it means that this is the ultima ratio measure. We do not think that this is the best decision. And sometimes when the environment is toxic, when there's no care, or when the child is being labeled and is finding difficulties, sometimes changing the environment for the child, the space, and starting from tabula rasa is the best choice. Do we have all the necessary services in our municipality? Yes, we do. We have a great variety of them. But is it true that only the most problematic children get access to those services? Sometimes we have parents that are very busy and have no time for their children. When you speak about the Vilnius city, you most probably have in mind the incidents near Sports Palace. We are working in our municipalities on a better understanding of children's bad behavior, and we see that there's a great variety of delinquent children, and the reasons for their behavior are very different. And children really need personal touch, personal time, and family time, and some protective factors when we speak about delinquency. We have measures, but another issue is children accessing. For example, I have Andrukas, who is 16. I don't have time to take care of him. I'm working full time consuming alcohol, and my child is delinquent, and I apply to Vilnius municipality? Should I go somewhere, or do I receive a bunch of specialists who come to my home and help me? How does this model work? Well, sir, first of all, we have preventive services that are provided to parents who are active in searching for help to their children. And we have a very wide variety of such services, including consultations for parents, group consultations, where in public health center, Center for the Support of Children, and other organizations, tėvystėsįgūdžiai.com, where you can find all the available help on one web page. We have revised that and we have all this on in one place. But if we notice the bad behavior of children, and specialists get involved into that, we initiate some activities. If parents accept our support and help, we have success stories. But it is very important if we invite those parents to contact us. Some parents refuse to do that. And we are cultivating our ways of communication with parents and informing them on the need for the services by their child. We have a great specialists who say that really know ways to encourage parents to seek help for their children and to get help. This helps us to find the best solutions and to change the situation in the later years. We evaluate the families and we see what kind of families we have. And sometimes, if we see the need for services, so we try to understand ways to approach those families. We are enabling families first, and then we enable children. And we sometimes tend to look for those who we should blame, but I think we should not be blaming anybody. Mr. Pianya, for example, if a child is taken from the family, for example, in Vilnius, we have a wide variety of services, but the parents do not care, and nobody cares about that child and knows or doesn't know. Parents do not know where to seek help, and the the best solution here is um, to institutionalize the child. What is your answer?
In the cities, there is a variety of services, but when we look into individual situations, there are different cases. In regions, the sector of services is decreasing, and communities want to push out the child from their community, and there are different situations in families. And in some cases, parents tend not to invest a lot into solving problems of a child or even understanding a certain problem. In all cases, the beginning is the child's welfare commissions, where institutions discuss the situation of that child, about the services required, the so-called minimal care package, and what can be done in order to change a child's behavior. And when those instruments do not work, then we start talking about socialization center. And there are not many children who need that, but it doesn't mean that that minimal care package works in every case. In some cases, not very often, but parents refuse to raise their children. There are cases where parents ask the institutions to take away their child. Yes, there are such cases. They're very painful, they're very difficult, because children are taken away from the families when they are not physically or psychologically unsafe there. So in this case, we're talking about cases of bad, extremely bad behavior, children with addiction. And when I say a child, I refer to people who are under 18. And very often those families are single parent families, and there are single mothers who would like to, but cannot solve the situation. And those situations are rare. You mentioned the accessibility of services and the diminishing accessibility in the regions. In Vilnius, the situation is different, probably. But if a child lives in a region, in a remote area, somewhere far away from the center where there are no services, how do those child welfare commissions work there, and how they ensure that children receive Services. Commissions work everywhere, but when it comes to services, this is the issue. Oh, and children under 18 are often not very much services. And in municipalities, we often raise questions, what what are those teenagers doing late at night? Are they allowed into stadiums, gyms? And there is a library in one municipality that works 24/7, so children can go there. In Tauragė, librarians invite children late in the evening to the library. They give them dinner, they give him warm clothing. And this anecdote comes from 2-3 years ago. Yes, those goodwill initiatives are very important, and this is the beginning, and afterwards, other services come into place. And services that includes children into, for example, sports activities, they can bond with those children, get to know them, which is very important. You have to agree that the state should not rely on those people who sacrifice their own life for the good of the children. We're talking about the issues under 18, and we have to understand that adolescence is a very sensitive period of one's life, and people tend to behave irrationally, and it doesn't have to do with poor children care. And it's not the problem of parents not having social skills. There are many parents who do not spend time with their children or who are uninterested in their children. And there are children who care about their children and do everything, but they just cannot cope with the problems, and they need additional help. And I, as a mother of teenagers, continue to learn. And if parents need help, it doesn't mean they're bad parents. It just shows their responsibility, and we have to talk about it, because parents have to take care of themselves in order to help children. We need to analyze our behavior models and to find a place to do that. And that could prevent further behavior problems in children. And in all times, teenagers tend to behave inappropriately because they need to test boundaries, and we have to understand that. Ms. Liputa, I wanted to react to Edita's remark about engagement. And when children have nothing to do, they come up with many inappropriate activities. And if a school is rather small and teachers engage in extracurricular activities, very often those activities are not interesting for children, or there's a lack of activities that would be interesting for children. And sometimes children don't want to engage in certain activities. Some children want to uh, individual services, others want to engage, for example, in team sports, and the funding for that is not sufficient and cannot ensure that children receive interesting extracurricular activities. You have a plan. You have to admit that in remote rural areas, children will not be given opportunities to choose from a variety of extracurricular activities, and it costs. Yes, enthusiasm is not enough in this case, and uh, parents of children are not always able to drive children to those extracurricular activities. We have to solve the problem of transportation in terms of extracurricular activities, and it requires obviously funding. Mr. Sakalauskas, you said that children who commit crimes are not necessarily from problematic families. They sometimes come from good families. And why are there children who commit crimes?
Well, many are delinquent because they want to test the boundaries. They want to oppose grown-ups, want to fit in with their peers, want to feel the excitement, want to feel the thrill from 10, 12. In the age group of 10 to 12, we have a small group of children who do not grow of this. These children have personal traumas, a bad social environment, and they choose this criminal career. And first of all, we have to make the difference between this um, uh, traditional shoplifting, traditional delinquency, and serious problems. For example, we have the multidimensional family therapy. This is a project that is orienting towards socialization centers. This is a team of specialists who go and visit families and offer their package of services in the larger cities like Vilnius, Kaunas, and Klaipėda. And this is an attempt to change the family structure and perspective because the child is part of the family. If you want to change the behavior of a child, you have to change the structure of his or her family. Well, speaking about the librarian in rural areas, it is not a surprise. In ideal cases, municipalities should notice that it's this Tauragė district and maybe offer some resources to this librarian. This is the principle of subsidiarity. The community itself can notice the needs and the higher levels, such as municipality or the government, has to promote that, encourage that, and support that. Well, we have different municipalities. We have 60 municipalities in Lithuania. The Ministry of Social Security and Labor is monitoring this area. And when you look at the statistics, it's very sad. For example, in some municipalities, there's a lack of activities and resources. Well, it's like water in a glass. A glass of water is either full or empty. We lack funding, but we have more than 500 centers for children. The ministry made a project, targeted project, and gave additional resources for municipalities to establish such centers. The centers are active and really doing their good job. Do you have any questions from the audience?
Nėra visi pasyvūs.
No questions. We have a very passive audience. Ms. Jobiene, is it only about money? Can money only solve the problem of the lack of services? But it can help. European structural funds helped us a lot. They gave possibilities for municipalities. The breakthrough in family services and child services has increased due to European funds, but this is not enough. It's not about resources only, it's about the staff and the providers of the services. Very often, NGOs are providing services, but they tend to be established in large cities, and in some regions there's a lack of providers of services. There is a lack of resources, yes, but sometimes we have the resources, but we have to understand the needs of our community and use the resources adequately. Ms. Liputa, I wanted to share my experience when sometimes without funds you can achieve many good things. In Kaunas, we had an experiment. I was advisor to the mayor at that time, and I referred to all the institutions of culture and education, and I proposed them having half-day day camps for children, and we had sports schools, libraries, theaters, and we had the timetable, and all the children willing to join those summer half-day camps joined them, and we had so many children willing to attend. The institutions really work in summer times, and we have staff working there. But those small summer camps in libraries were very effective because it was not very costly, and sports representatives were very happy because they found new talents during summer camps. We actually did not look into statistics of children going in for sports in autumn after the sports summer camps, but we saw the positive developments, and children found it very interesting. Found it very interesting. They engaged in those activities, and sometimes this could translate into beautiful projects that could get funding. Well, you stress on things that are interesting to some children and not. Often, when you speak to children, you ask them, do you find your school interesting? Because they spend a lot of time at school, and they say no. So, what can we expect from a child if a child says that half of the day he or she spends is boring? Half of the day activities he spends in is boring. Ms. Jobiene, we understand that resources and funding is only details.
politinės komandos, savivaldybės vadovų tiesiog elementarus susigaudymo situacijų supratimas ir politinės.
Is there a political will or political understanding of politicians in municipalities of the need of the services, especially in terms of children that are delinquent? Well, this is very necessary if we want to achieve success. I worked a lot in this area and I coordinated the activities in this area. Leadership is very important, not only in terms of funding, but also on the relevance of the topic. I work with children with delinquent behavior and try not to treat this as a negative behavior. We have brought a model in 2020, which is a preventive model targeted at teens and the 4 major environments for the teens. And with schools, we conduct a survey on a biannual basis, and we see the tendencies of improving or improving relations with schools or with other spheres of life of a child. And here I agree with Orientally put that we can engage a local community. We don't always need experts. And it's not only about the number of psychologists. We can play the role of a resource ourselves with the education communities. We're working on this. We're trying not to look at the reasons of the delinquent behavior and the exclusion from communities. It has negative outcomes of self-harm, for example. We have to agree that the Icelandic model that we've brought in Lithuania speaks about rules, relations with parents, the role of parents and schools, cooperation between schools and parents. We have to see the delinquent behavior of children as a problem of the ecosystem of the school or family. I discuss a lot on this topic, and I see that if we dedicate enough time and we focus on that, trying to ensure that our children feel better, we tend to achieve good results. Children are growing personalities that have a lot of challenges, and it is our task of adults to notice them on time. Mr. Sakalauskas, is this algorithm really working in schools when teachers notice some problematic behavior and then communicate it to the parents and parents cooperate? For example, with the drug problems, children actually disseminate information, disseminate drugs and bring drugs to school. And for example, school, when noticing that problem, refers and calls parents, and parents say that, well, this is not true. My child is an angel. Well, this is not effective all the time. But the main question is, what do we see in this type of behavior? A delinquent, a perpetrator, or a child and his or her needs? If we see a child, we can look for more creative solutions. Certainly, the role of municipalities is very important, but the most important thing is what is being done in such situations. Do we call the police, or do we call parents, or do we try to look deeper into solving this problem? For example, offering camps for such children. And I had this situation when, for example, there was an opposition for delinquent children and their involvement in camps. Children use drugs for the reasons that I've already mentioned. They want to fit in with their peers. They want to test their boundaries. And research shows that 20% of 15-year-olds have tried different types of drugs. But we have many teenagers who use drugs, but only small percentage of them is being caught. And we believe that if we try to impose some measures against them, we will help that. I think that by empowering the municipalities, we have actually prevented school leadership from taking the decisions. I think that we have to have all the onus to this problem. If we don't blame parents, for example, for children's behavior, they are willing to receive help. But if we blame parents, they want to protect themselves. They are in a protective posture. And sometimes we can also see inadequate discharge of duties by parents as well.
Jeigu visi žino, kad
Is there a bullet point in your procedure that allows for people in schools to go through a child's things? Yes, these precedents encourage us to create a procedure in order to avoid traumatizing experiences, to avoid children experiencing the shame of other people going through through their things publicly. And we have these very detailed procedures describing the checking of child's belongings, and it should be not performed in a class, and together with the ministry, with the police department, all these questions were solved constructively, and we managed to reach an agreement. Depending on municipality, schools can choose how to organize this process. A school I want to talk about, they have a clear distinction between teaching and educating, and they have 3 level of organization of process. And the strictest measure is remote learning. The second one is integration. And the third is the usual order. And heads of schools said that the remote learning period is rather short, and the child comes back demonstrating a more positive and more proper behavior. And they are working with parents as well. And the school becomes children friendly, but also the one that operates according to rules. We are talking about children in the context of human rights, and it's important to admit that we have to preserve child's dignity, and going through a child's belonging may be effective that day, but what is going to be tomorrow or after 10 years, what the child can learn from that, to hide, to lie, because adults very often tend to go through belongings to, but what does that behavior teach the young people? They will be our citizens, they will be voters. What are they going to learn from us? As some uh, politicians offered to grow schools, and maybe that would send a very clear message for children. Yes, but it doesn't remove the reasons why children do that. If school sees as a narrow area and doesn't think about general education of children, then maybe yes, it's a solution. Ms. Jobiene, we see the terrible headlines about crimes committed by minors. Why? Maybe those children appear as monsters, and many people in the society um think that those teens are dangerous. And you say that we should not think like that. We have to agree that they're a part of our society, and everyone is a part of our society. We all live together, and at the beginning, we should start feeling basic human respect for one another and for respecting everyone's lives and understanding that they should assume the responsibility, but we also understand that regarding their age and social peculiarities, they might tend to take risks more, but nevertheless, it is our responsibility, and we cannot exclude them from our society. We need to help them. Some of them come back to the society uh, temporarily before they go back to the jail. Yes, there are people like that, but if we looked at a very young person, we can um, we can think about what can be done to motivate that person to change. Multidimensional therapy was mentioned. Other services. We have to think about how to change the behavior of a person in order to avoid this sad future. Because if our society condemns all these uh, teenagers, we need to understand how to help the teenagers and their parents and to encourage children to accept certain services and how to change our relationships. Ms. Beluna, would say that the current authorities of Vilnius are more progressive and you're visiting schools. And I will be talking about adults who are also part of the society. Are there many people who are very skeptical when you're talking about the algorithms that you mentioned? Yes, I encounter those people every day in a variety of areas, and people who are excluded because of homelessness or disabilities often face this kind of attitude when other people fail to look closely into individual situations. Much time ago, we wanted to establish a method how to work with children. One of my colleagues mentioned that it is very important to believe in the children we work with. We have to focus on the strengths of those children and how to help them. And sometimes the environment of certain children cause their bad behavior. And sometimes we even program young people to continue inappropriate behavior. And we cannot just simply fix children because they're human beings. They need support, and especially those who are the most vulnerable, who lack love from their family. There are many people who don't have faith in those children, but children are the reflection of our society. And we as a society still need to change. But what can we do with the environment that sees those children as monsters and does not even try to change their attitude towards those children? What can we do about it? Attitudes cannot be changed that easily. Sometimes we talk about what does the society wants. 3 years ago, we surveyed the Lithuanian society. It was a very comprehensive survey, and it included 100 questions. And one of the statements, what one of the questions was regarding the children delinquency, and 90% of Lithuanians responded that those juvenile criminals need to be educated rather than punished. Lithuanian society is not stupid. They understand what works and what doesn't. And yes, still 10% think that those children need to be punished, but we should focus on the 90% who believe in education. And since I've got a lot of experience in the area, I know people who 20 years ago, when they were minors, they were sentenced to prison and they're still in jail to this day. So we have to avoid those kind of situations. Ms. Liputa, can this be avoided? Throughout your remarks, you said that children are not interested in extracurricular activities, and you mentioned that there's a lack of services in municipalities, but also you mentioned some good examples. Isn't the situation is so tragic when it comes to juvenile offenders? There's always good examples. Could you please specify the question? I was surprised that you were able to find good examples because the society still thinks those juvenile offenders are monsters. Centers of socializations is the final measure, and detention is the last resort to solve problems, but at the same time, it's the easiest solutions. Is isolating is very easy. However, the education process is very difficult, and saying that politicians do not see the situation is not fair because we're also the part of society, but we all have different experiences. And I think that there's a lot of changes, and municipalities try to provide the needed services. Sometimes we lack human resources, sometimes we lack financial resources, and we understand that young people is a part of our society and our future. So it's not that everything is bad. All I wanted to say is that there are still problems that remains because there's still some level of juvenile delinquency. There are those horrible headlines labeling juvenile offenders, but we talked about that adolescents are often trying to test the boundaries. And yes, we can solve this problem in better ways. When I was a young professional, I remember that boys were forced to wear dresses to prevent them from running away from those socialization centers. And I know the attitudes towards the work with these children has changed.
Well, we don't have much studies. I work in the media and I see that Ms. Jabiana is a negative attitude to the delinquent children or protesting children are determined by the social media or the media. I think that media makes a big influence here. We are surprised about 90%. We would think that the percentage is quite the opposite because the media present us with a different situation. And if we look at the media, we'd think that 100% of people would think that delinquent children should be punished. But it's not we who create those stories, it's not the media that creates the stories or invents the stories. We actually ask our audience on the radio and we make polls on the radio or television, for example. Well, there is such an impression, but this is not a realistic reflection of the reality. Some more radical people are more active interviewees, and sometimes this is smoke and mirrors, and it depends on how we see this. And we need to be more positive in terms of our attitude in all the groups. We need to learn the understanding, and we also have to have the feeling of a balance. There might be a very serious crime committed by a teenager, but we cannot put that teenager in absolute terms and make a big fuss about that. And here we have to be very careful. We have to define our targets. And finally, we also tend to put labels on people which are not productive at all. Mr. Sakalauskas, what are your insights on media and social media and its role on the attitude in society? Well, with the exception of LRT, Lithuanian Radio and Television, well, I don't remember discussing this topic on the radio or interviewing a delinquent child. Maybe once in 14 years. I don't see this as a problem. I don't understand why we are discussing this. The numbers are very low. Well, we don't have positive publications in the media on work with children on the streets or best examples of Vilnius Social Club in Naujininkai or football club. We have examples that are good examples in society, but good examples are not attractive. People are not trending. Well, we have media as business, and if media demonizes delinquent children, calls them monsters, makes a scandal about that, this means that such articles or headlines are profitable, and this is business empire. But only through good examples we can make real changes. I think that we should not avoid discussing problems. We should communicate on them. I don't like when we voice the problems, but we don't discuss solutions. We have parents, children, politicians who are also responsible in finding solutions. But what we really lack on finding solutions, sometimes we tend to blame someone and trying to investigate the reasons for that. And those who want to help become desperate and they provide desperate help. So I think that we adults have to become wiser and to speak on different levels and find for possible solutions. The media is doing a very good job in raising the issue, and the youth delinquency problem is very much related to the European context where there is a gang problem. But I think that we should not ignore the problem. We should not overreact as well. Gintautas' personal experience was a very good example that this reaction or response has to be adequate, but has to be persuasive. I remember a teacher of my child who said that your child was so badly behaved, and asked the child, "What's wrong with you?" And the child started crying and spoke about his parents getting a divorce. It means that teachers of a subject can become human and approach the child, ask the child, try to see what the problem is. So I think that we have to be human and have to look into the problems that our neighbors or young people have. Young people are very much lost. We are speaking about the worsening mental health after the COVID closures and lockdowns. You mentioned an example of helping a child. I will give another example when a girl was crying for help. But school told that, well, this girl should be able to withstand criticism. and the girl finally changed the school, and she finally got into a different environment, and her situation improved. I think that the most important thing is whether you say that you see your children or our children, whether you see strangers or our own children, who are our or children or somebody else's children, whether these are delinquent monsters or whether these are children. And this also determines our solutions. Are our children good, Ms. Jobiani? Can you answer this question? Do you have any doubts? Well, this is my question. Our children are good. Our children are really good. I think that every person is good, but behavior can vary. So we have to work with this different behavior. And if we work with this type of behavior, it can change. If we don't deal with this in a team, we might have different outcomes. Ms. Belunia, are Lithuanian children good? I will agree with Edita. Have always been the person willing to implement children's rights. I had the opportunity to work with teenagers, and I realized that we have to always maintain this hope and this trust in a child. And I think that specialists and experts are the source of wisdom, and we can help others. I have no doubt in that. Miss Leiputa, what do you think? Are Lithuanian children good? Yes, of course. Maybe in some periods they behave differently from what we expect from them. But being together with children, giving attention to a child is the main thing. And children, in any way, no matter whether these are biological children, copy adult behavior. And I think that all things are interrelated. Do you agree with Ms. Jobiana, who said that all people are good, but they don't always behave in a good way, and this behavior can be corrected? Well, I might agree with that. Is Remigijus Žemaitaitis a good person? I think that Remigijus Žemaitaitis is a human being, and he is good, but his behavior might be evaluated differently by different people. And the last question, are Social Democrats right in accepting Nemuno Aušra into the coalition? Well, this is not related to our topic, but I think that Social Democrats have the heart which is on the right side, on the left side, and therefore this heart is big, who can embrace everybody. I think that many people can learn from our behavior. Many children can learn from our behavior. Mr. Sakalauskas, are Lithuanian children are good? Well, neurobiology is a study and discipline, and neurobiologists do not find any good or bad traits inside the brain, but the children copy adult behavior, and brains that control our actions depend on social environment. And if the environment was negative in one's childhood and infancy, the behavior might be dependent on that. Actually, things that adults create can be imprinted on children's brain. I thank all the panelists that we had today. We tried to see how children who are delinquent could be helped. Thank you.